Hello and welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I'm Derek Strauss with Gavroshe, and today I have the pleasure of talking with Jill Campbell. Jill is the former director ITSG and in the Program Management Office at Belcan, and she's currently doing some independent consulting work. Jill, welcome.
Thank you very much. Pleasure being here with you.
So Jill, we're going to be talking about a fascinating subject, which is this whole thing of managing data as a product. There's so much talk about that, and we're going to dive a little bit into the best practices to accelerate business outcomes. I think the members of our audience are going to be fascinated by this, and we're going to kind of break it up into three segments. We're going to talk about the problem in the first segment, then we're going to talk the root cause and the solution, really. And segment three, we're going to talk about data governance and a work in progress. Like we know there's a lot still to be done in this space, and where's it all going? So just a note to our audience, this is segment one that you've tuned into. Be watching for segment two and segment three, and be sure to come back to get the full story. So that said, let's just pile into this first segment here now about the problem. There's been a lot of talk about managing data as a product of late. In your understanding and the way you see it, Jill, what is it, and how do you do it? Let's get some of those basic ground rules in place first.
Sure. I'll start with a little bit of my background too and how I got into that, because I don't think I'm the typical data leader or data governance person. So my background is in IT infrastructure. So the beginning of time, we were talking about data is how do we manage that in a database structure, and IT professionals cared about all this stuff we had to store. And at that point in time, decades ago, there was not a lot of focus on big data. Big data has just recently been that thing in the room that all of a sudden we have all of this stuff that we need to understand. So at the beginning, IT was kind of concerned about it, but the business didn't really understand why they should care. So IT kind of stepped aside and said, okay, we're going to store this and we're going to do the best we can and we're going to put it aside. Now, let's fast forward 20 years-ish. I won't show my age. And now all of a sudden we have all of this data and it is, oozing out. And the business is saying, what am I supposed to do with this? I need access. It's not right. I don't understand it. Why is it not accurate? I think I go into this system and it tells me one thing, and I go into this system and it tells me something else. Why is it wrong? IT, why is it wrong? IT, what are you going to do about it? And we as an organization and infrastructure group saying, what are you talking about, right? We're here to provide a technical service. We don't know anything about your data. That's you. So we've come to a problem, right, of IT providing technical solutions and the business looking back at IT, saying, hey, this data isn't ours. So we've kind of come to a conflict of who owns this, right? Whose problem is it? First of all, not only identifying what the problem is, but who's supposed to be solving it? So we're focusing now on an organization trying to identify how to solve accuracy of data, access of data, and how do we manipulate data. And when we start aligning those things started to talk about words that we're using is data as a product, right? And how do we organize it? How do we access it? How do we curate it? How do we allow users to be able to look at it and ensure that it's accurate? So we try to make sure that we're partnering on the business and understand what they want to do with it. And then as we organize it, we can then come back to IT and help us try to solve it with some sort of technology, right? So that's really the crux of what we are trying to build out of this big, huge mess of big data. The challenge is, though, what's the system of record, right? Where's the truth? How do we know that this data is more accurate than this data over here? And that's really where we have to come back to ownership. and where is the origination of the data, and who's entering the data, and who owns the data. And as we go through that exercise of the origination and the curation of it, we can then start breaking down the identification of the real problem. Where is the truth? Or where do we choose the system of record to be, right? Because it can be two different interpretations. What we've experienced while I was at Belcan is, what is a definition of an employee, right? That seems simple, right? We know what an employee is. You have an employee number. I have an employee number, just like at every organization we work in. But what employee number is the right one? You may have an HR system where you enter that information, and it could be your social security number. It could be an assigned number. At Belcan, we provide employees to other organizations. Seems simple enough. However, we have a lot of different types of employees that we provide to organizations, right? We could be a contractor. We could be a additional augmented employee that's going to be there a long time, or we could be a very quick turnover where we're going to be in and out. So we have a lot of different type of services. So we have different identifiers of employees. And guess what? We have a lot of different systems where we enter those employees into. So we end up having a different employee numbers. So when somebody wants to ask the question, how many employees work for us? This all of a sudden becomes hard to do, because at this system, it tells us one number. This system, it tells us one number, because it depends on what type of employee you're asking for. So if we're coming down to a simple recognition of identifying data, we have to be able to understand what that definition is. And that's where the partnership of IT and the business has to come together to be able to align of identifying what is the data, right? What do we want to call it? And when we start talking about that, sure starts sounding like a product, right? Very much similar to the whole agile methodology. And that's when we start looking at curation and identifying data as a product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. So it stems from chaos. This whole thing it stems out of
big data, chaos, big data. Yep.
Yeah, and it stems out of a situation where people are saying, well, we don't like what we've got, and then other people saying, well, you didn't ever tell us what you really wanted, and now you're trying to bring those parties together. So yeah, fascinating. And I think something that resonates probably with everyone that listens into this is that kind of situation, because certainly what you saw at Belcan, and I'm sure what you've seen at many other organizations as well, is exactly that same situation that has developed over time, and people are all frustrated about it. And the only way is to get people together and to start really, talking about this thing and defining what is the product. Yeah, so thank you for that. I think that sets the scene very nicely for the next segment that we'll get into, where we're going to dive a bit deeper into the root cause and the solution behind it. So thank you, audience, for tuning in for segment number one. But be sure to pick up segment number 2 now, and we'll see you shortly.